When Germany's pharmaceutical industry was thriving, the country was a leading exporter both of opiates, morphine, and of cocaine, and drugs were available on every street corner. It was during this period that Hitler's inner circle established an image of him as an unassailable figure who was willing to work tirelessly on behalf of his country and who would permit no toxins, not even coffee, to enter his body. But there was one leader in Hitler forces. He was literally second most powerful Hitler forces in Germany, serving as president of the Reichstag, Reichsstatthalter of Prussia, and supreme commander of the Luftwaffe. He is a dandy with a penchant for flamboyant, bejeweled uniforms who lives in a palace inside a park full of fantastic monsters. His passions include big game hunting and acquiring stolen artwork. Hermann Göring is a larger-than-life figure. Hermann Göring is a towering character with a remarkable career that includes being a legendary flying ace in World War I and serving as Hitler's second-in-command. He formed the Luftwaffe and established German intelligence as Prussia's interior minister. But behind his celebrity is a portly guy with a drug addiction who is obsessed with power, prestige, and a showy lifestyle. Göring rose to prominence during World War I as commander of the Flying Circus, the Red Baron's fighter squadron. Göring was a well-known ace by the end of the war, having scored 17 verified kills. After the war, Göring became an early supporter of Hitler Forcessen. He participated in the brewery putsch in 1923, during which he was shot in the leg. He became addicted to morphine while healing from his injury, despite the fact that he had been using opiates since World War I. Göring was always larger than life, and it is fair to call him a selfish and showy narcissist. However, addiction rendered him delusional, untrustworthy, manic, grandiose, and insomniac. He experienced a wide range of emotions and was prone to throwing outbursts. The opiates disrupted his hormones, causing him to acquire a significant amount of weight, reaching more than 130 kilograms. In 1930, he went to a Swedish psychiatric facility for rehabilitation, which helped him overcome his addiction. Göring suffered from a toothache in 1937. However, the time he spent getting off narcotics was critical. During these 7 years, he helped construct the Hitler Force's reign of terror in Germany. Despite looks, Göring was no clown. He was extremely competitive, intelligent, and brutal. His peculiarity is what makes him unique and interesting. After the Hitler forces took power in 1933, he established new posts for himself, including Master Huntsman of the Reich and Master of German Forests. With unrestricted access to public finances, he began to realize a dream: the construction of his magnificent rural house, Karinhall, named for his Swedish wife Karin, who died of a heart attack in 1931 when she was 43. Now that he had conquered the German forests, he felt entitled to rule the most beautiful territory that could be found within a reasonable distance of Berlin. He chose a location in Schorfheide. He purchased a stunning 100,000-acre property and converted it into a private reserve where he hosted hunting parties and banquets in his opulent woodland mansion. And when I say palace, I am not joking. Göring, like a European monarch or a Roman consul, intended his legacy to be a spectacular monument for future generations. The entry hall was 45 meters wide and used as his private art gallery. He had special chambers for storing his most prized possessions, as well as a 25-meter-long attic containing solely a massive miniature railroad. And that's only the top of the iceberg. The estate did not survive the war, yet it is still worth visiting Karinhall online. Nonetheless, beginning in 1934, he began collecting pieces of art. He became a rabid collector, utilizing his abilities to obtain the most rare and beautiful pieces he could find. When Poland was invaded in 1939, Göring began to save Polish art masterpieces. In 1940, he established the Einsatzstab Rosenberg, a special Hitler Forces task force dedicated solely to confiscating important works of art for his personal benefit. Many were taken from the private collections of Jewish victims of the Hitler Forces dictatorship, and Göring was a strong proponent of this program. He quickly accumulated so many statues and artworks that he intended to create a Hermann Göring museum on the grounds of Karinhall as soon as the war was over. That wasn't the only costly plan for his park. Göring was an avid hunter who sought to stock the park with wildlife, particularly big game. He kept a lion as a pet and brought bison and elk from Scandinavia and Canada, believing they would reproduce and populate his park. He even had Lutz Heck, director of the Berlin Zoo, experiment with new species crossbreeding, specifically ancient species. He asked Heck to reconstruct extinct creatures such as the European aurochs. The purpose was, naturally, to hunt them and recreate mythical scenes from the epic German poem Nibelungenlied, in which the Teutonic hero Siegfried slays dragons and other forest creatures. And he hunted. For example, he had Lutz release animals confiscated from the Warsaw Zoo into nature reserves before pursuing them in an expensive hunt. He made it a special treat for his Luftwaffe aces to come to Karin and shoot something spectacular. His celebrations, including his grandiose housewarming and birthday parties, were famous. They frequently included costume changes, elaborate tours of his home, quick vehicle rides around his estate, and lavish dinner parties. Guests were expected to bring expensive gifts, such as pieces of art, marble statues, or bars of real gold. A diplomat said of him, "A tall, fat, good-natured man who likes to flaunt himself above everything else, displaying his vanity at every turn, often making his guests look amusedly at each other." Oh, and while we're talking about outfit changes, Goering was extremely vain. With each new title he devised for himself, such as Master of the Hunt and Reichsmarschall, he developed his own unique clothes. His Reichsmarschall outfit featured a gold staff studded with gems. But it went beyond uniforms. He dressed like Caligula. He was frequently seen hunting in medieval attire and enjoyed wearing crimson Roman togas. His quirkiness, body weight, and outlandish public behavior earned him scorn. Many jokes were made about the man, who had no shame and took things too seriously. Hitler enjoyed making jokes about himself, once describing how Mrs. Goering discovered her husband swinging a stick at his pants in the bedroom and asking him what he was doing. He said, "I promote my underpants to overpants." He was known as der dicke Hermann, or the Fat Hermann. It was one of the few things in Hitler Forces Germany that could be joked about, aside from other Hitler Forces leaders, because practically everyone found it hard to have genuine respect for the indulgent, noisy, attention-hungry man. So, was Goering simply a joke? Definitely not. Goering was one of the most powerful figures in the Third Reich. He was brilliant, a skilled manipulator, and would go to any length to attain his aims. He had a significant impact on economic, cultural, and military policy. He supervised countless purges in the early years, including the Night of the Long Knives, led the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain, and was accused of complicity in the cruel Hitler Forces war against humanity. It's easy to forget that this clownish man had a significant role in the Hitler Forces regime. It is also intriguing to consider how his lifestyle and drug addiction affected all of his public affairs. More importantly, beneath all of this baroque comedy, this possibly appealing strangeness, was a guy who committed unfathomable evil. His Luftwaffe unleashed hundreds of thousands of bombs on civilians. The territories he occupied had been plundered from the German people. He lived at the expense of the countries invaded by Germany. Victims from whom he stole paintings were sentenced to the gas chamber. Hermann Goering, who surrendered to US forces, became one of the most prominent Hitler Forces officials captured alive. His trial at Nuremberg would be one of the most important events in post-war justice. The Nuremberg trials, which began in late 1945, were the first international court procedures to prosecute significant war criminals, and Goering, given his position in the Hitler Forces government, was one of the most famous defendants. Despite his addiction and the effects of withdrawal, Goering arrived at the Nuremberg trials looking extremely serene, if not belligerent at moments. He allegedly acquired confidence after being weaned off morphine, and during the trial, he was vocal, intelligent, and fiercely defiant of his acts. He continued to depict himself as Hitler's loyal servant, attempting to excuse many of the Hitler Force's horrible actions. Goering denied any direct involvement in the Holocaust, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His role in aiding the genocide and his participation in the exploitation of conquered lands sealed his doom. One of the pivotal moments in the trial occurred when Goering clashed with the primary prosecutor, US Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson. Goering, who was nonetheless extremely brilliant and a gifted speaker, attempted to fool Jackson during cross-examination. At times, he appeared to be winning the verbal sparring, which earned him considerable plaudits from observers. However, no amount of defiance or charisma could change the truth that he was one of the architects of Hitler Force's oppression. Despite his outward assurance, Göring could not escape the consequences of his conduct. His involvement in the Third Reich's atrocities, whether it was his role in the Kristallnacht pogrom, his oversight of the Luftwaffe's merciless bombing missions, or his economic plundering of occupied nations, made him one of the most infamous Hitler Forces leaders. When the verdict was revealed, Göring was sentenced to death by hanging. He was one of the few top Hitler Forces commanders executed, and the sentence reflected his critical role in the system. However, Göring was determined to control the circumstances of his death, just as he had attempted to control every aspect of his existence. Göring smuggled a cyanide capsule into his cell the night before his scheduled execution in October 1946, and then used it to commit suicide. The means by which he received the capsule is unknown to this day. Some suggest that he concealed it among his personal things, while others believe it was smuggled to him by a sympathetic guard. Göring's suicide denied the Allies the ultimate act of justice they desired, his public execution. But it was also a final act of defiance from a man who had always sought control over his destiny.